the quietest but most exhausting battle a person fights doesn't begin with what happens to them. It begins with refusing to accept what happens to them. The more you fight the scenes life places in front of you, the more resistance grows inside. And as resistance grows, the cycle tightens. The same pain returns, wearing different faces. The same feeling repeats through different events. Because destiny isn't a line you can forcefully rewrite. It's a message you resist. And as long as the message isn't heard, it will speak again from the same place. In psychology, this state is described as repetitive resistance. When someone denies what happened, suppresses it, or rushes past it, the subconscious brings them back to the same point, because every suppressed emotion wants to return in a stronger form. Sufism explains the same cycle from an even simpler place. The more you fight fate, the more fate repeats itself. Fighting doesn't create solutions. It only enlarges the stage. According to Ibn Arabi, fate does not work against a person. It works for them. But when someone sees what happens to them as an enemy, they draw a war line between themselves and destiny. And in that war, no one wins. Because destiny cannot be defeated. It only waits. And while it waits, it places the same lesson in front of you, again, but in different forms. Then you ask, why again? But the real question is, why am I still resisting? Most of the time, resistance is born from fear, not fear of the unknown, but fear of losing what is familiar. A person struggles to let go of the pain they're used to, because what's familiar can feel safe, so they push back against the change destiny brings. Psychology explains this as the comfort zone paradox. Even pain can feel safer than an unfamiliar peace, if that pain is familiar. Sufism calls it what it is, a trick of the nafs. The nafs wants to repeat what it already knows, because the unknown requires surrender, and surrender is often misunderstood. Many people think surrender means giving up, bending the knee, becoming weak. But in Sufism, surrender is not abandoning the struggle. It's accepting the meaning. Ibn Arabi describes surrender like this: when you stop fighting fate, fate stops speaking. In other words, surrender is the moment the cycle breaks, because fate speaks because of resistance. Think about the scenes that keep repeating in your life. The same kind of relationships, similar disappointments, familiar loneliness. Each time you said, "This time it will be different." But it wasn't, because for it to be different, it wasn't the event that needed to change. It was your stance. In psychology, this is called reactive repetition. A person keeps the same posture, but expects a different result. Sufism says it more clearly. The same inner state calls the same fate. Fighting fate often sounds like this: this shouldn't have happened. That sentence carries a hidden rejection, and a mind that rejects what is cannot understand why it is. A mind that doesn't understand ends up living the same scene again, because fate wants to be understood, not to punish you, but to wake you up. And when it isn't recognized, it raises its voice. According to Ibn Arabi, the rising voice of fate is not the calamity. It's the warning. The calamity is not hearing the warning. So it isn't what happens to you that traps you. It's the resistance you build against it. And that prison is not external. It's mental. It's emotional. Feeling stuck in the same loop doesn't mean fate has locked you in. You remain inside because you locked the door to meaning. Psychology sometimes confuses this state with learned helplessness. But in truth, it's the exact opposite. In learned helplessness, a person stops trying. But the one who fights fate does the opposite. They overtry. They attempt to control, to force, to fix. Yet the more you try to control fate, the harder it becomes. In Sufism, this is called interfering with wisdom. And the one who interferes with wisdom can no longer see it. Another reason fighting fate keeps you trapped in the same cycle is this: fighting scatters your attention. When you're busy struggling, you don't feel, you don't understand, you don't listen. You suppress what is happening, and everything you suppress returns through fate. Because fate is the art of making what's buried visible. Psychology calls this projection. Sufism calls it tajalli, manifestation. Tajalli is the hidden becoming revealed. Whatever remains unresolved in the heart, fate brings onto the stage. And when you fight the stage doesn't change. Only the scenery changes, the actors change, but the script stays the same. Because the script is written in the heart. One of the most striking points in Ibn Arabi's understanding of fate is this: fate is not fixed, but it becomes rigid toward the one who insists on resisting. When resistance softens, fate softens too. That's why some people reach a point where they stop living the same things, because they stop fighting fate. They turn toward understanding. And understanding is this: changing the question from why me to what is this trying to tell me? When that shift happens, the cycle begins to loosen. Psychology calls this cognitive reframing. Sufism calls it seeing the wisdom. When wisdom is seen, fate becomes quiet because its task is complete. Maybe you're tired now of fighting certain things, tired of constantly fixing, of trying to be right instead of trying to understand, of controlling everything. That tiredness isn't weakness. That tiredness is the edge of transformation, because the place where you're most exhausted is often where you finally learn to let go, and letting go is surrender. When surrender begins, the cycle breaks. The more you fight fate, the longer you stay trapped in the same loop, because fighting keeps you stuck in the past. Acceptance opens the future. Acceptance does not mean approving what happened. Acceptance means stopping the war with it. When the war ends, the lesson becomes visible. When the lesson is seen, the repetition ends. Ibn Arabi says, "When the servant makes peace with fate, the path opens." Peace is not silence. Peace is not resisting. When you stop resisting, fate can no longer find a reason to imprison you, because the message has finally arrived. Now you can ask yourself, gently, what am I fighting in my life? What event am I still pushing away as this shouldn't have happened? What feeling am I still refusing to face? The answers to these questions carry the key that takes you out of the loop, because fate doesn't lock the door from the outside. The door opens from within. And maybe for the first time you're noticing this. Fighting fate never made you stronger. Understanding it is what's beginning to set you free. And that freedom is exactly where the cycle dissolves. Fighting with fate creates a quiet but constant tension inside a person. From the outside, life looks like it's moving forward, but inside, the same question keeps echoing. Why did this happen? That question may look innocent, but it carries a strong rejection. Because most of the time, why isn't asked to understand. It's asked to protest. And the more the protest grows, the louder fate becomes. The same scenes return again. Only the sets change. In psychology, this is called a resistance cycle. When someone tries to fight an experience instead of accepting it, their mental energy is spent on defense, not on resolution. And a mind that's stuck in defense mode can't learn. A mind that can't learn repeats. Sufism offers a very clear truth here. A servant keeps circling inside the very state they reject. Meaning, rejection narrows the stage of fate. According to Ibn Arabi, fate takes shape according to your inner state. If there's war within, there will be repetition without. Because fighting pulls you out of the present moment. Either you get trapped in the past, or you try to force the future. But fate can only be read in the now. If you can't accept the present, you can't read fate. And because you can't read it, you end up living the same sentence again and again. Look at the cycles that exhaust you the most. You will always find an objection there. A truth you can't accept, a bond you refuse to release, a chapter you can't allow to end. This is exactly where fighting fate begins. Psychology explains this as grief being suspended. If grief isn't processed, the loss doesn't complete. And whatever doesn't complete returns in different forms. Sufism sees unprocessed grief as a weight on the heart, and the heavier the weight you carry, the longer the road becomes. The biggest illusion of someone who fights fate is this: they believe control will save them. But control is often the absence of trust. And where there is no trust, there can be no surrender. And without surrender, fate does not soften. Ibn Arabi describes it like this: the servant runs from the fate they don't trust, and the more they run, the closer it comes. Meaning, avoidance feeds the loop. Psychology points to the same truth. Avoidance may bring relief in the short term, but it enlarges the problem in the long term. Every emotion you avoid facing will return on another stage, because the subconscious doesn't close what you refuse to face. It does the opposite. It looks for opportunities to make it visible. Sufism calls this visibility an ikaz, a warning. A warning exists to wake you up, not to punish you. Fighting with fate also gives you a constant feeling of, I must do more effort, more sacrifice, more patience. But some cycles don't end through effort. They end through letting go. In psychology, this is called releasing control. In Sufism, it is tawakkul. Tawakkul is not doing nothing and waiting for a result. Tawakkul is refusing to force the process. When the process isn't forced, the language of fate begins to change. According to Ibn Arabi, making peace with fate doesn't mean loving what happens. It means not fighting what happens. When the fight ends, meaning becomes visible. And when meaning becomes visible, the loop dissolves. That's why some people live the same life but not the same fate, because their inner stance is different. The same event can imprison one person and free another. In psychology, this difference is called perceptual flexibility. When someone can see an event from more than one angle, the cycle breaks. In Sufism, this flexibility is called hikmah, wisdom. Hikmah is sensing the divine order behind the event, and what is truly sensed does not need to repeat, because its task is complete. For someone who fights fate, life feels like an endless exam. Every event becomes a threat. Every change becomes a risk. Every uncertainty becomes a source of fear. This constant alarm mode exhausts the person, and as exhaustion grows, resistance grows. As resistance grows, the cycle tightens. At that point, fate has to speak more harshly. That harshness is not what fate wants. It's what resistance produces. In Sufism, this is described as a severe warning. When the servant misses the gentle signs, the warning expands. Psychology describes a similar mechanism. When small stress signals are ignored, the body produces stronger symptoms. The goal is not to harm. The goal is to get your attention. Fate works the same way. It repeats to be noticed. And resolving the struggle with fate rarely happens in a dramatic moment. It doesn't always require huge decisions or sudden cutoffs. Resolution often begins as a small softening inside. Maybe it starts when you replace "this shouldn't have happened" with "maybe this has a meaning." Psychology calls this acceptance-based awareness. Sufism calls it the gate of Rida, contentment. Rida does not mean glorifying what happened. It means not waging war against it. When the gate of Rida opens, fate no longer tests you the same way, because testing exists as long as resistance exists. When resistance lifts, the test turns into guidance. According to Ibn Arabi, fate becomes a teacher shaped by your inner state, hard to the resistant heart, gentle to the surrendered heart. Because the teacher's aim isn't to punish, it's to teach. And maybe you're realizing now, in the cycles that drained you the most, there was always an objection. This shouldn't have happened to me. I didn't deserve this. It shouldn't be this hard. Every one of those sentences was a fight with fate. The more you fought, the longer the lesson lasted. And the longer it lasted, the more exhausted you became. At this point, psychology suggests developing self-compassion. Self-compassion doesn't mean accepting the mistake itself. It means accepting the fact that you are human. Sufism sees that compassion as the reflection of a divine mercy. When the heart softens, fate softens too. Because fate does not respond to hardness with hardness. It responds to softness with softness. By now you can probably feel it more clearly. Fighting fate didn't move you forward. It only made you more tired in the same place. But when you turned toward understanding, even if just a little, a small relief appeared. That relief is the sign that the cycle has begun to loosen, because ease is the place where fate stops speaking. Ibn Arabi has a saying that is almost a summary of this whole part. The more the servant resists, the narrower the path becomes. As they accept, the path opens. The path opening does not mean that everything suddenly becomes perfect. The path opening means you are no longer walking in circles on the same spot. Stepping out of the same cycle is the quiet but most powerful result of making peace with fate. And maybe now, for the first time, you're beginning to feel this. Fighting with fate didn't protect you. Turning toward meaning has started to set you free. Because no lesson is passed without being learned. Think about the cycles in your life that keep bringing you back to the same point. Maybe you've been tested with similar relationships over and over. Maybe you always find yourself with the same kind of emotional exhaustion. Maybe no matter what you do, you end up in the same disappointment. There is a common denominator in all these repetitions, the inner state that needs to change. Psychology at this point talks about core schemas. A schema is the fundamental belief a person carries about themselves and the world. In Sufism, this schema is called the direction of the heart. As long as the direction of the heart doesn't change, the direction of destiny doesn't change either. Being at war with destiny constantly pushes a person into trying to prove themselves right. I'm like this because they treated me like that. I'm this hard because life was hard. I can't let go because I loved too much. All of these sentences secretly carry a defense, and defense is the biggest barrier in front of learning. In psychology, defense mechanisms are the ways a person tries to protect themselves. Sufism sees these mechanisms as veils over the heart. The thicker the veil, the later the truth becomes visible. Ibn Arabi describes the biggest mistake of a heart that fights fate like this. The servant tries to fix what happens to them and forgets themselves in the process. Because while a person is busy trying to control events, they neglect their inner world. When the inner world is neglected, the outer world repeats. Destiny rebuilds the same scene to make visible the place that has been ignored. Sometimes that scene appears as a relationship, sometimes as a loss, sometimes as a long period of waiting. The form changes, but the message stays the same. Psychology says these repetitions are directly related to a person's emotional needs. When emotional needs are not met, the subconscious generates scenes that could potentially meet those needs. But if the need is not recognized, that scene may be written with the wrong people in the wrong conditions. Sufism calls this seeking in the wrong place. When a person looks for the right need at the wrong door, that door will close on them every time. The more a person fights fate, the more an inner hardness forms. This hardness acts like a shield against life, but as the shield gets heavier, the ability to move decreases. In psychology, this is called emotional rigidity. The person loses flexibility. And when you lose flexibility, you can't see new possibilities. In Sufism, flexibility is connected to surrender. Where there is no surrender, the heart hardens. When the heart hardens, destiny hardens. According to Ibn Arabi, the harshness of destiny is a reflection of the servant's own harshness. That's why some people experience life as a constant struggle. They are constantly tested, constantly strained, constantly running into obstacles. Yet, destiny fights only with the one who wants to fight, and speaks with the one who wants to listen. Listening is not passivity. Listening is noticing the sign. In psychology, listening to yourself is called emotional awareness. If you've listened all the way to this point, it means you're tired of fighting the same battles and you're finally ready to understand what life has been trying to tell you. So, I want to ask something small, but very meaningful, from you. If this talk touched your heart, go down to the comments and write just this sentence: "Oh my Lord, teach me to understand my destiny instead of fighting it." Let it be a witness for your own heart and a silent prayer for everyone reading it. If you would like to keep walking on this path of inner wisdom, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next reflections inspired by Ibn Arabi. And if there is someone in your life who is stuck in the same painful cycle over and over again, share this video with them. Maybe the key that will finally open their door will come from the words you heard here today. Thank you for being here, and may your path be guided by understanding, not resistance.